Very much. The next item on the agenda doesn't look like other items on the agenda, and that's because it's a report from me. So this is a follow-on from the council meeting of the 12th of February, where we resolved to adopt the medium plus option for the establishment of a development authority. At that meeting, we asked the Chief Executive to bring a revised funding model back to Council that would minimise the impact on rates. So this is really the funding model that is being brought back. I think one of the issues that I'd like to highlight in here that perhaps isn't as obvious in terms of reading the document is that the funding of it is repayable to the to CCHL. So we're not talking about money being made available to the development Christchurch in order for it to be sunk cost. It's actually about making that money available so that it is able to return that money. So it's by way of a loan, and that doesn't have the impact on the rates. I understand people were a bit concerned about committing to $5 million in the initial phase, or 4.5 with 1.5 over the 3 years. So my proposal, I'd be perfectly happy to accept that we have 1.5 million over each of the next 2 years, and then we can review the whole process as part of our annual planning process next year. I think that this is really important, and I guess if life had been different and we had brought in Corda Mentha and they hadn't established the extent of our financial problems, and that we hadn't had to look to bring in Camerons to look at our management of our assets, I think that we would have set up this last year, and we would now be reviewing a year's performance. And so I guess the circumstances that we inherited has left this a bit slower off the track than I would have liked, but I think it is absolutely vital that we get this up and running. There are a number of things that are going to be happening in the next wee while, particularly as we're talking around transition with the Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Act due to expire in April next year. So that's a year away, and I think that we as a council have to be put on a footing where we are seen to be and absolutely committed to be doing things differently, and actually seeing ourselves as playing a catalyst role in the redevelopment, not just of our city centre, but of our suburban environments as well. So, New Brighton, Littleton, Sumner, these are all areas where there have been proposals. Sydenham, there are areas all around in each of our wards that would actually benefit from this. We were looking at Bishopdale the other day in relation to the redevelopment of the Bishopdale Library. There's land that's made available by that. It starts to look more like a development proposition when you've got an agency that's able to separate itself from the normal process and see itself as maybe redeveloping a component of the mall down there. And so suddenly the contribution of the land is bigger than the result of the contribution of the land is bigger than just the sale of the land would be. And I also think of places like the old convention centre site, which we've taken back into our ownership from V-Base. We could sell that piece of land. We had a couple of people, sort of propose different options for buying it. But when you see the development potential of the whole area, you start to see that now I'm going to get this wrong, it's the whole is bigger than the sum of the parts. And when you can get I finally got it right, when you can finally get a mechanism for what is normally a council process suddenly moved into a process that enables all of these different opportunities to be taken, then you start to see that we can really catalyse growth, not just in our CBD, but in the wider community as well. I know that I know personally that the people of New Brighton will welcome the fact that there is a mechanism for delivering their ambitions, because their ambitions are great, and great in terms of my support for them, but also great in terms of the extent of what could actually be delivered there. And it isn't just about ensuring that that the ideas are able to be brought to fruition. It's just that it enables people to have a mechanism for raising good ideas with the council, but not having to come to the council and then us having to go out and get advice on the unsolicited proposal. They can go straight to the DA, they can put together a proposal, and then it can come to council with all of the advice that we need. So I'm very keen to see this up and running. I think that the sooner that we get onto this, the better it will be for the city, and I think the city will welcome the fact, and I'm sure the business community will welcome the fact that the council sees itself as playing more than just a replacement for what was there, but a catalyst for the new city of Christchurch, whatever that may be. So I don't know if anyone's got any questions or comments. You'd like to move it? Paul Lonsdale moves.
I've got some questions if I can.
Well, Ali Jones still second, right? Okay.
And yeah, 4 questions if I may, all of which relate to democratic oversight and governance. And it's really just checking in that I've got the correct understanding of what I've read from the report. Who are we directing these questions to?
Well, I suppose me. It's my paper.
Great, thank you.
And I might have to call on others for assistance.
So I just wanted to check that the statement of intent would be subject to approval by the council.
Yes.
That all projects and desired project outcomes will be subject to approval by the council,
yep,
regardless of where they come from. So they might be projects that are instigated at the council's request, or there might be things that land at the DA that then come for our approval. That would be the same in both cases?
That's right. The DA itself won't be able to initiate projects, so they will be able to receive unsolicited proposals and then bring a recommendation to the council, and we as a council can refer projects to them.
Yep, now that's all good. Board appointments, both initial board appointments and any changes to the board, can they be made subject to final approval by the council?
Yes, as I understand it, the CCHL would propose the appointments, but it would come back to council for sign-off.
So that would be as a matter of course?
Yes.
Yep, great. And then my final question relates to reporting. And I think given the obvious interest that we've got in this area and the need for it to get up to speed very, very quickly, and councillors' obvious interest in the type of work it's going to be doing, and also, I guess, given some of the concerns around oversight and governance, I'd like to suggest that reporting happen monthly to the Strategy and Finance Committee with a fuller report every 3 months, so a face-to-face sit-down every 3 months. Yep,
I think that's
possible.
Unreasonable. I think that's a good idea, and I presume you're referring to a monthly written report.
Correct, yeah, so a written report every month and then a full
quarterly.
Quarterly.
Okay, yeah. So the reason that I think that that's a good idea is that this is not a BAU model. So this is not something that the council has done before, and I think it's not unreasonable to have a reporting regime that connects the council to what is an arm's length development agency.
Great, that's fine. So I can take the answers to those questions as read in the document we've got before us. There's
yep.
no need to note anything alongside the resolution.
No, but I could. I'm perfectly happy that those items are noted.
I've got all 4 of them written here, so I can pass them to staff if we can add them as notes. Yep, that's great. Thank you.
Yanni.
Thank you. I think I know you've given us a lot of information, but my understanding from your resolution is you're really wanting us to approach CCHL around the establishment, and so nothing that we've currently seen kind of informally should be either ruled in or out. I mean, CCHL might come back with a different model or a different structure, but that we're really asking them to come back around it. Is that?
Well, no, we're requesting them to capitalise an existing shelf company. I mean, obviously there's been discussions with the chairman and the chief executive.
Yeah, we've spoken about this at the board, and we've spoken to the chief executive and the chair, and they've been involved in designing this process to make it as straightforward as possible.
Right.
Right, it's just that there's a number of things in the informal information that we've received that I don't personally agree with, but at some stage we'll have to have a discussion about what's in or what's out, or the different accountabilities.
Well, we signed off a previous paper on the 12th of February, and that determined a number of the factors around the establishment of the Christchurch Development Authority. What this does is give it a name, Development Christchurch, and so Development Christchurch is the proposal that we're asking CCHL to capitalise. Right. So a number of the features of the medium plus model that was proposed have already been signed off by the council, so that will be referred to CCHL.
Right, okay. So the things that were talked about with Andrew, some of that stuff wasn't part of that and was quite deliberately not part of that medium plus option. So we had a light option, a medium and a medium plus.
We already signed off on the medium plus option.
And so that's the core of my question is, even though we've already signed off on that option, if there's a number of other things that we want amended or included, we have that ability once that report comes back from CCHL.
No, we've already determined the structure of the company, and what we're doing now is capitalising it as we were requested to do. So the council already decided back in February what the model would be like, and this is the funding of it. Well, the points that Andrew has raised are some checks and balances that I think on balance are acceptable, given that we are moving to a new model.
Yes, I understand that. My concern is that a number of points that Andrew's raised, which you've agreed to include, are different than the medium plus option that we've already agreed to. So I want the flexibility to be able to incorporate those when it comes back, rather than being told we've signed off on the medium plus option and that's what it is.
No, we've signed up on the medium plus option, and we are accepting, I mean, none of these are inconsistent with the medium plus option. They're not inconsistent, none of them are.
Okay, I'll have a different reading of it, but I'll take your word on that, and if we need to change it, then I guess we can do that. Just the other question from me is around the funding. So I'm concerned at the level of funding without any kind of budget. Is it possible to request a budget and look at a reduction in that funding? Well,
I think that we will have an opportunity to review this in the annual plan, as I said before. I mean, to get the company up and running, it is important that it has a basis for hiring staff, for bringing in, they're probably consultants rather than permanent staff in many respects, around some of the individual projects that we might refer or which might be raised with them. So I don't think that it's important to review that right now, but in terms of how long this takes to get up and running, I think we'll be into the round for the next annual plan, and we will be able to review whether we need to add to it or subtract to it at that point.
So my concern without seeing a budget is asking CCHL to approve 1.5 million of funding for an organisation when we don't know what projects it's going to do.
Yeah, but CCHL has already talked, CCHL have already discussed this, and they are more than willing to provide this equity injection to get it up and running. The idea is that that money will be returned over time.
Yeah, no, I understand all that.
And yeah,
it's just around the extent of the money that we're putting in, which is about 1% on rates, maybe a little less. And so it's a trade-off between the other things we want to do and the financial challenges we have as a council.
Well, no, it's not, because the other things that you want to do is to spend that money. This is lending this money, so it's money that will come back. It is not an alternative to a rates reduction, and I think this is a much preferred model from my perspective than the one we were going to consider last time, which would have had a rates impact.
So before any money gets spent, do we have any other ability to sign off on it once we can see the budget and what the costs are?
Well, I presume that the CCHL, I mean, we've got a statement of intent to sign off, so I'm not too worried about that. I mean, I haven't got the detail of how that will apply with respect to the budget, but the statement of intent will actually lock down what it is that the Development Authority does for us.
And what the money's spent on.
Yeah. But each project is referred by the council or approved by the council. Yeah. Okay.
So, Leanne, do you want equity or a repayable loan in that second line?
I'm not. Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm now looking to members of the board.
It doesn't matter. CCHL will come back with a proposal for you, which we will then approve. So
Okay.
they will need to come back with this establishment board, what the actual budget is, how it's going to be structured, and then we'll come back again for sign.
All right. Okay.
The two things mean different things, though. So if you mean money up front that is then repaid, then we should perhaps put the word repayable or something in there. I mean, that's what you're talking about. If it's not what you mean, then what you've got there is fine.
Can we put slash? Can we put slash loan so that it's open?
Yep. Oh, it's not.
Profits come back.
Yeah.
That's the whole point. So
Yeah.
it's equity. I think you don't want to confuse it with loan. That makes it more complicated for the balance sheet. So it's equity that hopefully is repaid over time as it actually generates.
Yeah, it is over time. It's not like a loan. But yeah, leave it till then. Right, so, okay, so that's been moved and seconded. Is there any debate?
I just have a question.
You have a question? Yep.
Sorry, do you see any, or what are the parallels with the chip that we're setting up? Okay.
Not.
All right. Not. All good.
Okay, right. Any debate? Andrew?
Thank you. Yeah, I certainly welcome this report, and in particular I welcome the suburban as well as the central city context of this. Areas like Sydenham, Littleton, New Brighton are obvious contenders for the attention of the new DA. Questions have been raised over governance, and I fully understand the arm's length nature of the relationship between the DA and the council, plus the potential for conflicts of interest and perceptions, at least, of political influence over what essentially is to become a commercial vehicle. The governance concerns for me are largely addressed by the 4 points that we've put up there. The council's ability to approve the membership of the board, the statement of intent, the projects undertaken and their outcomes, and then regular and detailed reporting back to the Strategy and Finance Committee and obviously to the council through that committee. I'm hopeful that the DA will do a lot more than just delivery of the council's suburban master plans or the council's key project, anchor projects. I'm hoping the DA really adds value and brings about work that otherwise wouldn't have been able to happen. So my expectations of what's going to be delivered are reasonably high, and I'm hoping that you know, what we see is everything that we're expecting from this organisation. Certainly, if you look at projects like, you know, various projects in New Brighton where we've got funds already committed through the annual plan, the long-term plan, whether the DA could unlock some some issues there to enable faster development and greater private investment. That's certainly one that that I would like to see. Littleton, we've got an issue there that I've talked about on a number of occasions around development economics and privately owned small sections where the intervention of the development authority quite possibly could unlock that. Sumner, we've got a huge project in the form of the Sumner Library, which if that was to be looked at through a different set of development eyes, we may see opportunities for combined residential development, commercial interface at ground level, and so on, or we may not. But at least this DA gives us the ability to explore some of these things and bring about outcomes that we might not otherwise have seen. So the need for this, I think it's fair to say, is well canvassed. The need for a single landing point is definitely acknowledged, and that's one thing that will represent a huge improvement of having one DA that becomes a single landing point for people that want to invest privately in the city. And really this is bringing about a body which will catalyse and support development both in the suburbs and the city centre. So, I mean, this is the vehicle, it's the project that it's going to bring about that I really look forward to.
Yeah. Jimmy?
Thank you. I support the mayor's recommendation with the Andrew, the 4 point. The reason is the first timing, because I still consider, for the regeneration of the city is urgent. Because while after February 2011, the earthquake, up to now, we are aware not only in central city, in the city-wide, still quite a few project of the facilities not yet still need to be the kind of undertaken, either repair or rebuild. So regarding timing is my particular concern. Second is in the last probably a year, I was told by quite a few the potential investors, even from region, from nationwide or from the international, they all have a strong intention, would like to partake of this rebuild the city. If we lost this opportunity is not just stay in there. We need to consider, we know maybe we no more have this opportunity. Third one is because of this regeneration, I personally view is very good. Not only the restrict in the CBD, but actually it's the citywide. But it's, that's very important because we always mention, Christchurch city. But actually Christchurch not only in the central city, but also need to consider the suburban area, even the rural area. When you consider this kind of balance, etc. The first the point, you based on the mayor's revised financial situation, $1.5 million times the 2 years, $3 million, and also if they create this new development, the kind of the Christchurch authority, you can create the benefit feedback to the either CHO, etc. So actually small investment, but we can get a huge the response, huge the benefit. We need to consider cost and the effective. We need to consider, and also you based on the document here regarding the legal comments in here, particularly mentioned. Actually, in principle, we back to the February of this year the meeting minutes. Actually, in that time, in principle, all of the council, we support this development, the authority. Only request the CEO bring back us regarding to the kind of financial issue only. But my personal view need to focus on the point. So based on this, the opportunity, timing, scope of work, financial impact, legal comment, and also with the Andrew, the 4 point put into this recommendation. So I fully support this, the mayor's recommendation. The Christchurch need to go on, need to move on, rather than just stay in there. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul?
I welcome the Development Authority. I think it's something that's long overdue, and I think the council taking leadership in this space is actually really important. We've got a massive job ahead of us to rebuild the city, and of course we were told, early on that investment was going to pour in from overseas and it was going to land here in Christchurch. Well, that actually hasn't happened because it's difficult. We've been very lucky that we've actually had Christchurch developers, or they're now actually developers, they weren't developers before, and they're property owners, have actually rebuilt many parts of the city and are actually reinvesting back in the city. However, we've actually had some move their capital to another city, and that is the biggest threat we face right now, is capital moving to somewhere else rather than Christchurch. We know that capital moves every day. I see that this vehicle will allow capital land here in Christchurch and be coordinated with our own efforts. So I think that as a council, taking leadership in this space is really, really important. I think that it will actually highlight to the rest of Christchurch and even New Zealand that we are standing up and wanting to make a difference in the rebuild of our city. So I'm going to fully support this here and get behind it, and it'll be great to review it in a year's time, and hopefully we've actually made some really good gains and movement in our rebuild of our city.
David?
Thank you. I'd just like to make the point, I think this is a great move. There's been the perception in the city that all the development is focused on the CBD, and a lot of our suburban areas have been left to their own devices. I think this innovation will give the opportunity for our suburban areas to really flourish, and particularly when council spends quite considerable sums on suburban master plans. They are aspirational plans, they've got no statutory obligation, and I think that we have now a mechanism where the aspirations of the community can be picked up by this development of authority and given some impetus in our suburban areas. So I will be giving my full support to this motion.
Phil, sorry.
Look, I'm going to support it too, and I have to say though, I have some reservations about supporting it, which I've expressed. And I think though, that Leanne's answers to Andrew regarding some of the processes and the checks and balances, that gives me some assurance. But I think that those processes in terms of reporting, they're more than just acceptable. They need to be more than acceptable to us as a council. I think they're actually absolutely necessary. I think it's clear in the report and the comments from our CFO that in fact, there are some issues around future financial funding for development Christchurch, and those sort of things have to be taken into account. We need to remember that in fact the money we will obtain from Christchurch City Holdings in effect is ratepayers' money, and we're responsible for that. So I'm supporting it, but I think it's essential that in fact the new entity, that it remains responsible to council, and especially because there are some big projects involved. And like I am assured that because we'll be reporting on a project by project basis, and in that way I think it's workable. So with that in mind, I will support it.
Yeah, Jamie?
Yeah, I'm very supportive of this. The most pleasing aspect is that I'm really heartened to see that as a council, unless someone's going to blindside me here, and have a slightly different tone to their speech, we all seem to understand the situation we're in. We really get that it's not business as usual. This is a really big shift, a paradigm shift for how not only our council, but councils in general often operate. It's not business as usual, and this is an entity that's going to say, we recognise that, and we're going to transform ourselves around how we get things done. It's a transformation of Bruce Jenner proportions, and it's very, very different. And the framework that we've had in place just does not work. The sort of things that we're lacking right now, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to find out that we are incredibly low in hotels. We need to have hotels here. But the structures that we have in place and the investment proposition just isn't really attractive enough. There's no real strategy around it, and we can't afford to be waiting any more time to just hope that it magically works itself out. That the fairy godmother investor from offshore just simply isn't going to be tipping in their hundreds of millions of dollars unless we can really have a coordinated effort that is not business as usual, that joins things up, perhaps liaises with Development Auckland and puts together a package deal that actually says this is a New Zealand Inc. approach, this is bigger than Christchurch, because do you know what, we're kind of small fry, and unless we can have a coordinated, intelligent approach to it, we're going to muddle around forever, and we'll look back in 10 years' time or 20 years' time, and my kids will be saying to me when they live in another country somewhere else, oh, you know, what was it like in Christchurch? I want them to know the Christchurch story because I want them to love Christchurch as much as I do and still be here. This is about creating reasons for us to have a really, really rich future as a city. We cannot afford not to do it. I caution against doing it on the cheap from the start. You always pay for it more in the long run, so please be cognizant of the importance to do it properly. I think we're all on the same page, and it's stuff like this that really reminds me why I'm so excited to come along to a council meeting at this time in the city with all of you. So getting accreditation back, hiring a great CEO, creating a viable financial strategy, probably the most three important things that we've needed to do. The fourth is this. It is a little bit too late, but hey, we're doing it now, and that's as good as it gets for the situation that we're in. So let's get on with it. I back it. It's early days, but this is the big one of what this term's going to be about, and it's a defining initiative.
Okay, Yanni.
Thank you. I'm happy to support the resolutions going through today, recognising that we will have an opportunity to approve the SOI, which will include also the expenditure. I do think it's important that we look at a vehicle going forward. You only need to look at the relationship in this building in terms of the deal that we did as a city to see why it would be good to have some other body looking at these sorts of major investments to make sure that we don't get called into the traps that have often gone with some of the deals that we've done previously as a council with private developers, whether it's car parks or whether it's civic buildings. I do want to make the point that I think is really important, though. We've heard a call for us to, sell off our libraries, and we have been open-minded in terms of what we've looked at. But when we got the library report, council ownership is the most cost-effective and has the least impact on rates, because leasing from investors have higher whole-of-life costs and larger impacts on rates. Developers require a margin, and investors require 7.5 to 8.5 yield, and the cost of borrowing is higher for them than councils, plus you get the ongoing rent increases. So I think we do need to be cautious around just how much of council facilities go into this development agency versus the need to get things happening in local areas that aren't currently happening with the private sector. And or the government sector, actually. If you take the example of Housing New Zealand and the complete lack of master planning happening in areas like North Linwood, Avonside, where there's huge potential to do things in a different way, in a more joint-up way, that actually builds communities, builds back local businesses, and builds back, I think, a better environment than we had previously. So I think the concerns for me are that this can't be seen as a top-down structure. This can't be seen as telling people what to do. It needs to be community-based and cooperative, and move cooperatively forward. It needs to avoid the duplication. We have a number of agencies, whether it's the airport, CDC, CCDU, Invest Christchurch, all doing stuff in this space, and I think it's really important that what we do doesn't duplicate what's already there. I also think it's really important we focus on making sure that we're not just funding a whole bunch of expensive overheads on consultants, directors' fees, CEO salaries, more communications and engagement salaries, or actually much better that money goes direct to those communities and to those projects rather than be tied up in expensive consultants. I just think we really need to think sharply when the SOI comes back as to how we get the best investment of that money. But I think it's really heartening to hear that this is hopefully be similar to our social housing, and that it's not having a rates impact. It's actually about creating a self-sustaining entity that can do things for the greater good of the city. So I'm heartened to hear that will be a really key focus. I think it also shows the value of actually retaining our strategic assets, that it enables us to do things like this through this process, which is a real positive. And it also enables us to use, and I note in the report, we will still have to comply with the Auditor General's public procurement policies, and I think that's a really important point to note, because it does give us that accountability and transparency around how that procurement will happen. And I just want to finally make the point that there's been a lot said that things haven't been happening, but actually, you know, again, we need to make sure we have a really robust risk assessment around the projects that the DA does, and I appreciate that those projects will come in front of council for decisions in terms of whether it should go ahead or not. But if you take the convention centre and the hotels, actually I believe that this council, if our blueprint, or not our blueprint, our central city plan had been adopted when it was, we'd see hotels being built. People want certainty and clarity in the rebuild about timing, and our plan actually gave people that. So there's some criticism in these papers that council can't do certain things, and I kind of disagree with that. I think actually if we'd been able to do our things without the top-down approach that was put on us, then actually you would see hotels investing because they knew where the convention centre was. So, you know, I think we do need to balance up the need to have this independent board or independent DA at arm's length doing things versus what we can actually do ourselves when we have control over it. And that's hopefully through the SI again we'll have a chance. So thank you for adding these additional things. Happy to support the thing that's being put forward today, recognising that I am concerned about the cost.
Yeah. Thanks very much. Look, I really appreciate the quality of the debate today. I think that people are seeing this as an incredible opportunity, and I understand people's concerns about doing things differently and taking a bit of a risk. And yes, risk aversion in the local government sector, it's pretty much alive and well. But we have to take this risk because, in my view, it gives us the opportunity to do things that we wouldn't otherwise be able to do. And I'll make this point to you. There was a lot of discussion around the setting up of the Central City Development Unit within SERA. And when SERA was set up itself, there was a lot of advice given to central government about inner city regeneration authorities, basically. And I actually went and visited all of them except the Beirut one. And every single one I spoke to told me about how important it was to engage with their communities. When I met with the guy that used to head the London Docklands group, he basically said that the biggest mistake they made was to develop a piece of land as if they didn't have any neighbours. And the minute they started talking to their neighbours, that development took off. And so anyone who has a concern about this not being embedded in a community process can take comfort from the fact that international best evidence says that it's the best way to work. So, I do thank councillors today. I think that we are going to see a bit of a step change, and that's what people are looking for in terms of the council. It does provide us with opportunities that we haven't had before, and if we don't take those, then we'd be letting a serious crisis go to waste, just to paraphrase. So I will put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you very, very much.